双语音标领航，注音阅读启蒙，叶兴阳有声读物。
History of Friedrich II of Prussia v. 17 by Thomas Carlyle. The 7 Years' War. First Campaign. 1756-1757. Chapter 1. What Friedrich had read in the Menzel documents. The ill-informed world, entirely unaware of what Friedrich had been studying and ascertaining, to his bitter sorrow, for 4 years past, was extremely astonished at the part he took in those French-English troubles, extremely provoked at his breaking out again into a third Silesian war, greater than all the others, and kindling all Europe in such a way. The ill-informed world rang violently, then and long after, with a controversy. Was it of his beginning, or not of his beginning? Controversy, which may in our day be considered as settled by unanimous mankind, finished forever, and can now have no interest for any creature. Omitting that, our problem is, were it possible in brief compass, to set forth, by what authentic traits there are, not the ambitious, audacious, voracious, and highly condemnable Friedrich of the gazetteers, but the thrice intricately situated Friedrich of fact. What the facts privately known to Friedrich were, in what manner known, and how, in a more complex crisis than had yet been, Friedrich demeaned himself, upon which latter point, and those cognate to it, readers ought not to be ignorant, if now fallen indifferent on so many other points of the affair. What a loud-roaring, loose and empty matter is this tornado of vociferation which men call public opinion, tragically howling round a man who has to stand silent the while, and scan, wisely under pain of death, the altogether inarticulate, dumb and inexorable matter which the gods call fact. Friedrich did read his terrible Sphinx riddle. The gazetteer tornado did pipe and blow. King Friedrich, in contrast with his environment at that time, will most likely never be portrayed to modern men in his real proportions, real aspect and attitude then and there, which are silently not a little heroic and even pathetic, when well seen into, and, for certain, he is not portrayable at present, on our side of the sea. But what hints and fractions of feature we authentically have, ought to be given with exactitude, especially with brevity, and left to the ingenuous imagination of readers. The secret sources of the Third Silesian War, since called 7 Years' War, go back to 1745, nay, we may say, to the first invasion of Silesia in 1740, for it was in Maria Theresa's incurable sorrow at loss of Silesia, and her inextinguishable hope to reconquer it, that this and all Friedrich's other wars had their origin. Twice she had signed peace with Friedrich, and solemnly ceded Silesia to him. But that, too, with the imperial lady, was by no means a fineness to the business. Not that she meant to break her treaties. Far from her such a thought, in the conscious form, though, alas, in the unconscious. Again, it was always rather near. Practically, she reckoned to herself. These treaties would come to be broken, as treaties do not endure forever. And then, at the good moment, she did purpose to be ready. Silesia back to us. Pragmatic sanction complete in every point. Was not that our dear father's will? Monition of all our fathers and their patriotisms and traditionary heroisms, and in fact, the behest of gods and men? 10 years ago, this notion had been cut down to apparent death, in a disastrous manner, for the second time. But it did not die in the least. It never thinks of dying, starts always anew, passionate to produce itself again as action valid at last, and lives in the imperial heart with a tenacity that is strange to observe. Still stranger, in the envious valet heart, in that of Bruhl, who had far less cause. The Peace of Dresden, Christmas, 1745, seemed to be an act of considerable magnanimity on Friedrich's part. It was, at the first blush of it, incredible to Harrach, the Austrian plenipotentiary, whose embarrassed, astonished bow we remember on that occasion, with English Villiers shedding pious tears. But what is very remarkable withal is a thing since discovered. Infra. Next note, page 276. That Herac, magnanimous signature, hardly yet dry, did then straightway, by order of his court, very privately inquire of Bruhl, there is peace. You see, what they call peace, but our Treaty of Warsaw, for partition of this magnanimous man, stands all the same, does end it, to which, according to the documents,
Bruhl
hardly escaped from the pangs of death, and still in a very pale yellow condition, had answered in effect,
Ha!
Say you so? One's hatred is eternal, but that man's iron heel. Wait a little. Get Russia to join in the scheme. And hung back, the willing mind, but the too terrified, and in this way, like a famishing dog in sight of a too dangerous leg of mutton, Bruhl has ever since rather held back, would not re-engage at all, for almost 2 years, even on the Czarina's engaging, and then only in a cautious, conditional, and hypothetic manner, though with famine increasing day by day in sight of the desired viands. His hatred is fell, but he would fain escape with back unbroken. How Friedrich discovered the mystery concerning Menzel and Weingarten. Friedrich has been aware of this mystery, at least wide awake to it, and becoming ever more instructed, for almost 4 years. Traitor Menzel the Saxon Kanzelistwi, who have prophetically read what he had to confess when laid hold of, are aware, though as yet, and on to 1757. It is a dead secret to all mortals, but himself and 3 others has been busy for Prussia ever since the end of 1752. Got admittance to the presses. Sent his first excerpt about the time of Easter Fair, 1753. Time of Voltaire's taking wing, and has been at work ever since, copying dispatches from the most secret Saxon repositories, ready always on Excellency Malsen's indicating the peace wanted, and of late, I should think, is busier than ever, as the Saxon mystery, which is also an Austrian and Russian one, gets more light thrown into it, and seems to be fast ripening towards action of a perilous nature. The first excerpts furnished by Menzel. Readers can judge how enigmatic they were. These Menzel papers, copies mainly of Petersburg or Vienna DSBATCHES to Bruhl, with Bruhl's answers, the principal of which were subsequently printed in their best arrangement and liveliest point of vision, in Friedrich's manifestos, chiefly in Memoire raisonné sur la conduite des corps de Vienne et de Saxe, compiled from the Menzel originals, so soon as these were got hold of.
Berlin.
Autumn, 1756. A solid and able paper, rapidly done, by one Count Herzberg, who rose high in after times, reprinted, with many other pieces and passages,
In Italic gesammelte Nachrichten und Urkunden.
and Italic, which is a collection of such, 2 volumes, 113 numbers small 8 vo. No place, 1757. My copy of it, are by no means a luminous set of documents to readers at this day. Think what a study they were at Potsdam in 1753, while still in the chaotic state, fished out, more or less at random, as Menzel could lay hold of them, or be directed to them, the enigma clearing itself only by intense inspection, and capability of seeing in the dark. It appears, if you are curious on the anecdotic part, Winterfeld was the first that got eye on this dangerous Saxon mystery, some ex-Saxon, about to settle in Berlin, giving hint of it to Winterfeld, who needed only a hint. So soon as Winterfeld convinced himself that there was weight in the affair, he imparted it to Friedrich. Scheme of partitioning, Your Majesty, of picking quarrel, then overwhelming and partitioning, most serious scheme, Austrian-Russian as well as Saxon, going on steadily for years past, and very lively at this time. If true, Friedrich cannot but admit that this is serious enough, important, thrice over, to discover whether it is true, and gives Winterfeld authority to prosecute it to the bottom, in Dresden or wherever the secret may lie, who thereupon charged Malsen, the Prussian minister at Dresden, to find some proper Menzel, and bestir himself. How Malsen has found his Menzel, and has bestirred himself.
We saw.
Thief keys were made to pattern in Berlin. First set did not fit, second did. And stealthy Menzel gains admittance to that chamber of the archives, can steal thither on shoes of felt when occasion serves, and copy what you wish, for a consideration. Intermittently, since about Easter Fair, 1753. 3 persons are cognizant of it. Winterfeld,
My son.
Friedrich,
3.
and no more. Probably the abstrusest study, and the most intense, going on in the world at that epoch. Razzo.
Italic Charakteristik des Siebenjährigen Krieges and Italic, Berlin, 1802.
I, 23. At a very early stage of the Menzel excerpts, it became manifest that certain synchronous Austrian ditto would prove highly elucidative. That, in fact, it would be indispensable to get hold of these as well, which also Winterfeld has managed to do. A deep-headed man, who has his eyes about him, and is very apt to manage what he undertakes. One Weingarten Jr., a secretary in the Austrian embassy at Berlin, Excellency Publia's second secretary, has his acquaintanceships in Berlin society, and for one thing, as Winterfeld discovers, is madly in love with some chambermaid or quasi-chambermaid, let's call her chambermaid, daughter of the castellan at Charlottenburg. Winterfeld, through the due channels, applied to this chambermaid. Get me a small secret copy of such and such dispatches, out of your Weingarten. It will be well for you and him, otherwise perhaps not well. Chambermaid, hope urging, or perhaps hope and fear, did her best. Weingarten had to yield the required product and products, as required. By this Weingarten, from some date not long after Menzel's first mysterious Dresden excerpts, the necessary Austrian glosses, so far as possible to Weingarten on the indications given him, have been regularly had, for the 2 or 3 years past. Weingarten first came to be seriously suspected June 1756, Weingarten Jr. Let us still say, for there was a senior of unstained fidelity. June 15th. Excellency Publia pointedly demands him from Friedrich and the Berlin police. Weingarten Jr., my second secretor, fugitive and traitor, hidden somewhere.
Berlin.
22 D. June. Every research making for Mr. Weingarten. In vain hitherto. Italic, Gentleman's Magazine. End italic, 26. 1. E. for 1756. Page 363. Excellency Publia is answered. June 24th. We would so fain catch him. If we could. We have tried at Stendhal. Not there. Tried his mother-in-law. Knows nothing. Have forborne laying up his poor wife and children, and hope her Imperial Majesty will have pity on that poor creature, who is fallen so miserable. Italic, held in Gesticht. End italic, 3. 713. So that Excellency Publia had nothing for it but to compose himself, to honor the unstainable fidelity of Weingarten Sr. by a public piece of promotion, which soon ensued, and let the junior run. Weingarten Jr., on the first suspicion, had vanished with due promptitude, was not to be unearthed again. We perceive he has married his Charlottenburg beauty, and there are helpless babies. It seems he lived long years after, in the Altmark, as a Herr von Weiss, his reflections manifold, but unknown. Rezzo. I, 37. What is much notabler? Cognizio, the Austrian veteran, heard Weingarten's master,
Graf von Peubler,
talk of the grand mystere, soon after, and how Friedrich had heard of it, not from Weingarten alone, but from Gross First Peter, Russian heir apparent. Cognizio. I, 225. As to Menzel, he did not get away. Menzel,
as we saw,
lasted in free activity till 1757, and was then put under lock and key, was not hanged, sat prisoner for 27 years after, overgrown with hair, legs and arms chained together, heavy iron bar uniting both ankles, diet bread and water, for the rest, healthy, and died, not very miserable it is said, in 1784. Shocking traitors, Weingarten and he.
yes,
A diabolical pair,
they,
sure enough, and the thing they betrayed against their masters. Was that a celestial thing? Servants of the devil do fall out, and servants not of the devil are fain, sometimes, to raise a quarrel of that kind. The then world, as we said, was one loud uproar of logic on the right reading and the wrong of those Sibylline documents. Did your king of Prussia interpret them aright? Or even try it? Did not he use them as a cloak for highway robbery and swallowing of a peaceable Saxony? Bad man that he surely is? For Friedrich's demeanor, this time again, when it came to the acting point, was of eminent rapidity, almost a swifter lion spring than ever. And it brought on him, in the aerial or vocal way, its usual result, huge clamor of rage and logic from uninformed mankind. Clamorous rage and logic, which has now sunk irresuscitably dead, nothing of it much worth mentioning to modern readers, scarcely even its hic in footnotes, for the benefit of the curious. And it is, at last, a thing not doubtful to anybody that Friedrich, in that matter did read aright, so that now the loud uproar is reduced to one small question with us. What did he read in those Menzel documents? What fact lying in them was it that Friedrich had to read? Here, smelted down by repeated roastings, is succinct answer, for the ultimate fragment of incombustible here, as elsewhere, will go into a nutshell, once the continents of diplomatous gazetteer logic and disorderly stable litter, threatening to heap themselves over the very stars, have been faithfully burned away. Readers heard of a Union of Warsaw, early in 1745, concluded by the sea powers and the Saxon Polish and Hungarian majesties. Very harmless Union of Warsaw, public to all the world, but with a certain thrice secret Treaty of Warsaw between Polish and Hungarian majesty themselves too, the sea powers being horror struck by mention of it, which had followed thereupon, in an eager and wonderful manner. Thrice secret treaty, for partitioning Friedrich, and settling the respective shares of his skin. Treaty which, to denote its origin, we called of Warsaw, though it was not finished there, shares of skin so difficult to settle, and Treaty of Leipzig, May 18, 1745, is its alias in books, of which treaty, as the sea powers had recoiled horror-struck, there was no whisper farther, to them or to the rest of exoteric mankind, though it has been one of the busiest entities ever since. From the Menzel documents, I know not after what circuitous gropings and searchings, Friedrich first got notice of that treaty, now printed in italic over to Frederick, end italic for 40-42. Figure his look on discovering it. We said it was the remarkablest bit of sheepskin in its century. Readers have heard, too, that it was proposed to Brawl, by a grateful Austria, directly on signing the Peace of Dresden. Our partition treaty stands all the same,
does it not?
And in what humor Brawl answered,
Huh?
Get Russia to join. Both these facts, that there is a Treaty of Warsaw and that this is the Austrian-Saxon temper and intention towards him, and it, Friedrich learned from the Menzel documents. And if the reader will possess himself of these two facts, and understand that they are of a germinative, most vital quality, indestructible by the times and the chances, and have been growing and developing themselves, day and night ever since, in a truly wonderful manner, the reader knows in substance what Menzel had to reveal. Russia was got to join. There are methods of operating on Russia, and kindling a poor fat Tsarina into strange suspicions and indignations. In May 1746, within 6 months of the Peace of Dresden, A Treaty of Petersburg, new version of the Warsaw one, was brought to parchment, Tsarina and Empress Queen signing, Bruhl dying to sign, but not daring. How Russia has been got to join, and more vigorously bear a hand. How Bruhl's rabbidities of appetite, and terrors of heart, have continued ever since. How Austria and Russia, Bruhl aiding with hysterical alacrity, haunted by terror, and at last mercifully excused from signing, have, year after year,